Hey guys, it's Mathler here once again, and I have for the past few days been trying out a Inquisitor CI, which is a full energy shield base, Wanda. Now, I started this simply because I wanted to test out the Kinetic Blast changes, because as you know, in the past, for the Delve patch, Kinetic Blast got nerfed so it does not work that well for single target anymore, because previously you could line something up against a wall and have a lot of overlapping explosions. Those explosions don't really overlap from a single projectile anymore, so the single target from Kinetic Blast really isn't that good. However, the AoE is still absolutely top tier, and clearing delves, clearing maps, it's still as fast as it's ever been. It's simply that you won't get as much single target going out when you're using Kinetic Blast against certain enemies with certain walls and just overlapping projectiles anymore. So you really do have to rely on the crutch that is Barrage for your single target, which is basically what you've always had to do anyway. It's just that certain maps let you actually have much better single target than you otherwise would have. So in the end, we still resulted with a very fast Clearspeed character and one that is still pretty shitty for endgame, because Barrage in its current state with the wanding side of things is not that good unless you're investing very heavily, and I'm talking the Barrage enchant, Dying Sun, 6 links, all kinds of top tier gear. You need basically the cream of the crop gear for a Wanda to be even any sort of respectable for endgame single target. The clear, as you should be able to see through the next few minutes of clips, is still pretty incredible and very enjoyable, and the Celestial Kinetic Blast MTX is pretty cool, very overpowering for an MTX, but definitely pretty cool. And this Wanda here is CI, so it's fully energy shield based, meaning I can run an incandescent heart chest, which gives me some good leech and some good chaos damage as well, and it's an Inquisitor, which is just pure elemental damage stacking through Abyssal Jewels, through a wand, and the wand also has some damage on int. Damage for lightning per int, I should say. All of the gear I am using is pretty much crafted through dense fossils and other sorts of fossils, so the fossil crafting system has made all of this gear much more accessible, but to get a Wanda of this sort of caliber up to speed, it does take quite a specific amount of gear. You should be able to get a decent one happening as a Deadeye, life-based, maybe pure cold, maybe pure lightning, but once again, you won't really have much endgame single target potential. It's definitely something completely lacking right now, ever since they've constantly gutted the only excuse for single target you have, and that is Kinetic Blast. They've gutted the Frost Wall interaction, the actual wall-based interaction. Now you're left with a, well, pretty weak version of Barrage, and wanding single target is just garbage. The delve mechanics here for your Kinetic Blast, though, are pretty damn good. Running level 83 stuff here, the Val zones, and it's pretty smooth, and the regen I get from Inquisitor for my CI passives through Pious Path is nothing short of incredible. I do get 12% additional ES regen. I also have Ghost Reaver, so whenever I attack with my 1 or so % leech, I get quite a lot of ES back. So you can see throughout these sorts of clips here where I have to do a lot of standing still and taking damage, I recover damage pretty nicely, and I do have 7,000 energy shield as well, so it should be a little bit tankier than your traditional life-based Wanda, which you struggle to get like 5 or 6k life on, as well as respectable damage. This one has pretty respectable damage, very good clear, and then as well as that, a lot more defense than I would usually have in a Wanda. That said, still not that great for endgame single target, but it doesn't have to be. For clearing everything up to tier 15, 16, and some 300 delve action, it's very smooth, and I can still easily recommend Kinetic Blast for that action. You just won't really be taking on the Uber Elders too smoothly. I haven't yet done Uber Elder, I've only done the tier 16 Guardians, a Red Elder, and a few other little bits and pieces, and it hasn't been great, especially based off of my gear, which is pretty damn solid, so it's not something I could really recommend if you want to push into any sort of endgame. I'm talking tier 16, Shaper, even some Red Elder action is pretty damn tough for a Wanda to pull off, I think. And I can't really do much more on the damage side of things. This is just where we're at. I think the real problem is that a lot of other specs, skills, builds now have very solid Val skills. So your Wanding base here has, well, a Vile Haste. And that's a nice little attack speed gain, but your Vile Double Strike, your Vile Ancestral War Chief in a melee build can double, triple, quadruple your damage for the duration that it's up, and that is completely ridiculous. Your Blade Vortex has a Vile Blade Vortex, which doubles your damage. You have a Vile RF for the spell builds that can give you 50% more damage. Overall, they're just much stronger things. So this is a good example of my Red Elder DPS, which, like I said, it's respectable at this point, but I do have a pretty expensive character that won't be too easy to replicate, and you really would expect much better DPS out of it at this stage. The only thing left I can do is get a Dying Sun, which is a respectable damage upgrade as well. I'd go from my alleged 1.4 million Shaper DPS to about 2 million Shaper DPS, but it doesn't really feel too much like that because it's fairly situational for you to get all your flasks up, to get the damage while standing still, but you can see the damage can be decent, and as well as that, you can stand still and do some good tanking and regenning, which I'm not really used to as a wanding based character ever before, simply because I do now have a 7k energy shield. I do have an Incandescent Heart, which is a very big elemental damage reduction boost, slightly better than Lawweave even, and then a bunch of regen and leech. So all that combined makes you quite a decent little tank, but just the pure mechanics of having to wand for the end game with your Kinetic Blast and Barrage does not make it too comfortable, though you do also now have a Flame Dash, which is more or less a movement skill, at least a much better movement skill than Wanda's had before. Still not the best thing ever, but it does help quite a bit. So I took out most content without any real troubles, barely ever died. It's just not the smoothest when it comes to the high-end bosses, and it's not the smoothest when it comes to the highest end boss. I doubt I'll even be able to kill him, but I will try and Uber Elder tomorrow as well, and maybe let you know if it goes any sort of well, have another video. For now though guys, I will show you what it took to build this character, the idea behind it, and what Wanders are dealing with at the moment. So here's the character. It's currently level 92, called Wandering Towards Failure. Wasn't too sure about the whole CI aspect of things. Haven't made an energy shield or CI based character in like a year, but it is an Inquisitor, and I did choose Inquisitor because very good for elemental damage stacking when you're doing lots of different elemental damage, which I am here. I'm rolling a bunch of fire, cold, lightning, and then of course that gets converted to chaos a bit too. And then Sanctify and Pious Path, you get an additional 6% energy shield regenerated while on your consecrated ground, immune to ailments, and as well as that, consecrated ground gives you a bunch of extra regen when you have Zealot's Oath. So I'm pretty good on the regen aspect of things because, as you should be able to see here, my energy shield recharge per second goes over here from 140 all the way up to 990 every time I'm on consecrated ground with my sulfur up or through the Pious Path mechanic. So it's quite useful, and then as well as that, I do have a bunch of extra leech from Ghost Reaver. So I wanted to make it slightly different than I would usually make a Wander, which is just life-based, and go a bit more CI, and that frees up my passive tree for a bit more dual stacking. So the other thing is I wanted to build around Incandescent Heart, which gives you 25% of elemental damage taken from hits taken as chaos damage. So that does mean that you get quite a lot more damage reduction for your elemental hits there, similar to a Lawweave, maybe even slightly better, as well as that 20% early damage 20% of LE damage is extra chaos damage, quite a large buff there. A lot of extra leech, meaning you don't have to go out of your way to get leech all the way down here. And then it's got a decent bit of ES and light radius based on energy shield. It's kind of whatever. So it's a nice chest for this purpose of this build. And other than that, I'm just stacking pure elemental damage across the board. And I did originally start with a Piscator's. I then moved into a wand that just had some flat lightning, flat fire, and some crit. So Piscator's like 10C. Another wand similar to, you know, this, but without the lightning damage mod, ends up running you something like 5C. And then you got this one, which I ended up crafting with fossils, that lightning damage fossils, and cast more attack damage as well, or attack. So I think it's serrated and maybe aberrant. Something metallic and serrated, I think. And we ended up on this weapon, which I could then multi-mod and slam, and it's probably the best sort of weapon going around for a Wander right now. Even so, this pretty much absolute best in slot weapon and wand doesn't net me that much more than the Piscator's I had, which I paid 30C for, I believe. because it did have a crit corruption. So we're looking at this one here. Not this one, this one here had a crit corruption, so it's got a bit more crit than the usual one, and there's lots of these going around. Currently that's 1.28 million damage according to the POB. Doesn't really feel that way, but that's what it says. And then compare it to my other wand, another 250,000 damage gained. So something like 15-20% damage for multiple exalts. You're not really getting too much out of that. Though I'm not stacking int all that much. It is currently 400 int. It's just sort of a side project. But in any case, that's as good a wand as I could possibly get, and most of my damage gear is about as good as it can possibly be, just abyssal stacking. Crafted a lot of my jewels through metallic fossils. Basically, fossils have just been the name of the game for crafting this league. So you try and stack as much wand elemental damage as you can throughout your tree here or there. Bit of energy shield here or there if you can also get it, and that's just how we're going to build a wander these days. And then this wand and barrage and then kinetic blast. So our kinetic blast is sitting with a 4 link. So the important things here are kinetic blast, early damage attacks, GMP, and pierce. You do want the pierce so you actually go through enemies and get a lot of extra explosions and damage going that way, as you should see throughout the clips. And then the barrage was on a 5 link up until, I don't know, a few hours before this video, where I put in Ellie Focus. But the 5 link was Barrage, Crit Strikes, Damage on Full Life, Ellie Damage with Attacks, and Point Blank. I then put in Ellie Focus as the 6th link. And damage goes up quite a bit nicer from there too. And even with the 6th link, even all this gear, your single target's still never too impressive, but up until the tier 15-ish category, if you're just mapping, if you're just delving, your single target's going to blow shit up like that, and the mapping will be very smooth thanks to Kinetic Blast. It's just once you get into the bigger bosses that your single target starts to feel like shit, because you have to do a lot of standing still and a bunch more extra sort of sustain off of your flasks, and barrage just does not seem to be that good unless you're doing insane amounts of damage, which this still couldn't hit unless I get a dying sun, I guess. I don't know. So I do also have a barrage fire's additional projectile, Hubris. Rolled this with dense fossils, rolled my boots with dense fossils, rolled my shield with dense fossils. Dense fossils are really good for energy shield crafting. Rolled my belt with dense, I believe, plus prismatic, so you get the Ellie damage with attacks, a couple of resists. Bought some pretty basic rings that just have resist because I really need some of those, and then bought an amulet that has some good energy shield, craft percent energy shield, get some strength and dex going from that thing, and then of course Tomb Fist because Intimidate's really good, and then 2 abyssal sockets. So it's kind of tough and complicated to build, and I would recommend going for like a Deadeye or a Pathfinder, cold or lightning based, life based, if you're really kind of new to it and just want to get a bunch of mapping done instead of pure endgame, because this isn't the type of character that should be taking on endgame. I wouldn't recommend it. It's just that if you really go over the top with your gearing, you can then do the endgame as well, but it will be very fun to map with, and Kinetic Blast is still as good as it's ever been for that mapping experience. I then also run Herald of Thunder, Discipline, and Herald of Ice on my mana. That's the reservations I have, and my Heralds also have Curse on Hit attached to Assassin's Mark, so that's how I get power charges and a bit of mana return. Now I can't currently get any mana leech because the only form of mana leech I can get is 3 points down here for some attack damage leech, because physical damage leech won't be good enough. So I'm regen based. You can see my mana does run out. When I'm standing in consecrated ground, it's a lot better because it's 6% additional mana regen, but it is still a little bit iffy. So the mana is taken care of through some regen and the Pious Path consecrated ground, just in case you're going to follow this thing. And then otherwise we just go around, get our energy shield, jewels, and energy shield throughout the tree, and it really doesn't fall together until about level 70 when you get the incandescent heart. And that's when I spec'd into Chaos Inoculation, it's when I spec'd into Ghost Reaver, and also Zealot's Oath. Once you get all of that, and then your Uber Lab 2, that's when this entire thing comes together and starts to completely steamroll. But the first 1 to 70 levels are a struggle. I did manage to do it, and it was pretty fast overall, but it's painful, and it's probably best you spec into your life nodes, like over here, life nodes here, life nodes there, and then unspec them later once you're ready to go CI, because it's pretty goddamn hard trying to level this as CI and not have all of the good stuff put together. So it's definitely doable as a life base until you get to the CI version at level 70, and that's when you have all of your good ascendancies, and that's when things should start to make sense. Otherwise, the passive tree does build itself. You start there, you go there, down this way, probably through there, start getting the wanding stuff. I use Storm Prison wands up until level actually 70. That's when or 65 rather, that's when I put on my Piscators. And you try and get some Abyssal Jewels for the lower levels, try and get some leveling jewelry, and overall it can be a pretty smooth process. I think currently at level 92 it's still very fast. 22 hours at level 92 doing some endgame, some delvage, so it's still a very fast character. Not sure if it's worth following because it is kind of fun to build all this ES gear, but you do need a lot of ES gear to get this going and feel decent. And long story short, it's not going to be the end game destroyer that you want it to be. It'll just map well and delve pretty decently, but I don't know. Kinetic Blast, it's not the end of the world for it. It definitely needs some help, I think, at this point. Not Kinetic Blast itself, maybe Wanding needs something to really breathe life into it, a new skill, maybe some better passives, but it's definitely still viable, and it's not the end of the world for Kinetic Blast. It's still very farmable. If you want to farm your burial chambers or your low tier maps, Kinetic Blast is still a very amazing choice, and I still highly recommend it. It's just not the best thing, and it never was for the pure end game. So that's it for this character for now, guys. If I do Uber Elder, I will show you the next video for that as well, even if it's the world's biggest struggle, and if I end up doing it, it will be the world's biggest struggle. So that's it, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed this little video on the character and Kinetic Blast, and I'll see you next time.